Hello, my dear friends. Welcome to our 25th DLD Sync show. I'm very proud of this row of fantastic speakers, and I'm very proud of our today's show. It's a special one. As you know, my dear DLD friends, DLD is always on community, on friends, communities, and interesting topics, relevant topics. And today we have a special friends community. We have Mattias Ljungman, who already spoke five times at DLD, 2 times in DLD Israel, DLD Tel Aviv, and 3 times at DLD. He comes back with a friend, with David Helgason, and he will speak with Carsten Lem, our DLD editor. He's the one who writes the newsletter, who sometimes give me a lot of work and a lot of discussion, because I'm so enthusiastic and he is more down to earth. He says, cool down, Steffi. So this is our connections. And Carsten, the floor is yours. Please challenge these 2 fantastic guys. They are great European VCs, and Europe is our main topic, the scene in the investment capital scene in Europe. I'm excited that you're all here. Thank you for coming. David Helgason and Mattias Ljungman. And Carsten Lem.
Thank you, Steffi, for being such a wonderful cheerleader to our lunch discussion here. Thank you both, David and Mattias, for joining us for this. As you already heard, this is all going to be about the European startup scene, feeling the pulse, basically, of how it's doing. And since this is a special year with one dominating subject, let's dive right into this, actually. Let me ask, from your perspective, how healthy is the European startup scene, the tech scene at this point? David, maybe you want to
Well, start, when I started Unity in 2003-ish, it was obviously, somewhat smaller than it is now. It's great now. I mean, it's much, much bigger. And then people get really excited and they're like, it's grown so much. And my usual answer is, well, don't you think the other ecosystems grew as well? And actually, Mattias, when we chatted the other day, you had a numerical measure of that.
Well, yeah, I think it's right. It is booming, but again, the gap between the U.S. and Europe, we haven't actually narrowed it enough. So we keep growing, and things are just incredible. Today, there are over 118 billion companies in Europe, which is incredible.
Sorry, over 118 billion. That sounds like a lot.
118 companies worth over $1 billion.
Okay.
But there is a few that are worth a lot of money. One of them is Unity, of course. That's I'm not tracking it perfectly, but I think it's around 42 or 45 billion. So congratulations, David. Building something is extraordinary. Where I think 3-4 years ago, when people said that we're going to have multiple companies at tens of billions in Europe, people would probably question that. And now we're staring blindly, probably, of how do we get to the 100 billion? And again, that was something, David, you talk about starting your company in 2003. Well, when we started off Atomico back in 2005-06, I was talking about, how we're going to invest in the next $1 billion company. And trust me, everybody thought that I was insane. So it's just a change of mindset, suddenly it's become the new normal, right? So so to come back,
the ecosystem is becoming such a big part of the general economy. I mean, it's
yes.
Our companies, if we count, the companies that our community kind of creates, are some of the biggest companies. Yeah. It wasn't like that just a few years ago.
So let me actually ask you, David. You basically relocated to California in order to grow the company.
Yes.
This is something that when I lived in San Francisco from 1998 through 2014, heard a lot from, even as recently as 2014, that founders felt the need to go to Silicon Valley because European investors simply weren't willing to take the risk, they often told me. Do you feel that has changed? Can you now just stay put in Europe and sort of have a wild idea, a moonshot? Mattias, you called your new company Moonfire. do moonshots get money in Europe now?
Yes, I mean, it's a very different playground. I mean, when I moved back in 2009 to San Francisco with Unity, which was at that time like 30 people, and I was actually the only person that moved, and yada yada. We got money from one of the top VCs there. The gravity towards the Valley was extremely strong. I could just feel it kind of pulling my whole body there. And I think that gravity is much weaker now. There's still gravity towards big markets, and US is a big market, but it's a very different thing.
I mean, if I make a comment on that, I mean, I think we're seeing increasingly that we see the destruction of geography, right? It's not becoming as important as it was before. And being in a sort of massive hub like the Silicon Valley is, really powerful for founders. But at the same time, we're building a lot of powerful hubs here in Europe. So in terms of being able to get the support, the talent, the capital, that is beginning to sort of proliferate in different economies and cities across Europe. So of the sort of 118 companies that reached $1 billion, they're coming from 15 plus cities. So it's pretty widespread.
Yeah, and when Spotify, which is one of the biggest startups out of Europe ever, of course, if not the biggest, well, one or two. I mean, they, that was created by Daniel and Martin, who had already done something quite sort of successfully for its time, and now we're having quite a lot of people in Europe that have done something, for its that was good for its time, and yeah, I think we'll have a lot of talent here to build out of.
I'd like to go a little bit deeper on this. Why has Silicon Valley lost so much of its magnetism and its importance in a way? And also, Mattias, why is it that geography is not that important anymore? Because the classic narrative used to be that you have to have fundamental research, talent, in other words, new ideas, but also capital that is supporting these ideas. And typically, this is like a petri dish that you are close together, and connections are being made, and then magic happens, basically. So why is that not that important anymore?
Well, I mean, I think this call right now is a good example. I'm
exactly.
in London.
The computers created in Silicon Valley created the end of Silicon Valley.
We're creating it right here. We're in 3 different cities. I don't know how many people are logged on from where and so on. So doesn't really make a difference where we are today. And I think all these hurdles that we saw as these sort of offline hurdles that were holding companies back and founders back, the fragmentation, regulation, all this stuff is being sort of working at a different level when we're all becoming a sort of digital businesses. And information is free flowing, and so is talent. You can have talent, remotely anywhere in the world. So it's not as important, and in the sense that because actually those foundations are present here in the market already.
David, anything to add?
Yeah, no, yes, I agree with all of that. I was talking to one of the top VCs in Silicon Valley yesterday, actually, and he just as a sort of fresh update, he said, COVID has probably masked the exodus from Silicon Valley. Like, it looks like it's a COVID exodus, but he actually thinks it's a much deeper trend. So yeah, that's, it seems to be happening. On top of that, US kind of, I don't know what you can say in polite ways, shat its pants lately, politically. So I think, just one more step in sort of, making other places look better.
So we still, of course, have very clear clusters of innovation in Europe as well. For example, Sweden has Stockholm. Generally, so Mattias, your former company, Atomico, just released its State of the European Tech Report, and it identifies London, the usual suspects: London, Paris, Berlin, Stockholm. One of the nice surprises, as sort of innovation clusters, one of the nice surprises is if you actually look at population versus investments, then the small companies Estland and Sweden, smaller companies actually come out on top, which is it's a highly interesting read, highly recommended. But if I take what you just said basically to the next level, it would mean it almost doesn't matter anymore if you're in one of these if you're in one of these innovation clusters or not, because if we're seeing the destruction of geography, I could be sitting in some village in Romania, say, and have the same chances as somebody in London or Berlin. Is that really true?
I think first of all, the state of European tech, I think, is always amazing, and it's been so important as well to the ecosystem to sort of bring information, data, real data, that again, I think we can easily get lost, right? So they're doing a fabulous job, and again, you talked about Paris and the obvious, it's Paris, but Paris wasn't so obvious really 10 years ago. It wasn't really that obvious 7 years ago. And I think Paris is a great example of a roaring city, a city that is surpassing, Berlin. Let's be clear here, that Berlin was, going to be the next big sort of tech epicenter, right, in Europe. And Paris is doing a fabulous job of sort of being a competitor in that, if you want to look at it that way. And to me, yes, you can have great companies start in many different places, but of course, you're going to need a certain level of talent in these cities. So, I've been involved in a company or associated with a company that's called Bitmoving that started building out of Klagenfurt. Why Klagenfurt? Well, they had a really good university focused on the thing that they were working on. So these are the sort of parameters that might become even more important than ever before, where you have unique, distinct knowledge in some of these smaller places that you probably haven't heard of before, but they're doing something special. And so I do believe that, yes, great companies are going to come from anywhere. And that trend will continue, particularly now when you're sort of living in this sort of post-COVID era where people are getting used to that. And it's not becoming something where you have to be in a certain place. We're now very comfortable with remote working and companies coming from a lot of different cities.
Before we go into that a little further, you just mentioned something really interesting. You said Paris has done a lot of things right in comparison specifically to Berlin. What is it that Paris has done in this case that maybe any city can do, any place that wants to become an innovation hub can do?
Yeah, those things are always hard to tell, right? Because it's a mixture of lots of different things. But what I would say is that and it is
for the longest time, it was largely just people, right?
Yeah, and that's what I was going to get to. Like, I think
that's right.
Ultimately, if you let me finish, but it's basically Paris. Their universities are great. They produce fantastic software engineers. Google has known about this for a long time, which is why they've always had an office there. So I think that is something we can feel comfort with, because the European universities and the engineering talent across Europe is large and strong. So I think that's really important. Then there's been also a lot of capital in France, and then I think there was a change of mindset. Where they wanted to build big French companies, and then suddenly it moved to the mindset of, hey, I want to build great global companies. And so people coming out of these universities, they then decided, look, my next job is not going to be working for the biggest telecoms company in France. My next job is going to be building my own company that's going to be a global winner. So sorry, David, if I was like stealing.
No. You're right. It's a city that names its streets by mathematicians, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. But this sounds like more of a mindset of a new generation of entrepreneurs, less than something that maybe the government actively did or the city of Paris actively did.
But then later, it seems Macron has stepped up and made programs and so on. And there's a visa program that I think is the envy of other countries to some level. Startup visa program, and more of us should have that stuff like that. Absolutely.
I think that government has a sort of position to play in this in any kind of growth of an ecosystem, and they can help fertilize it and make it grow even faster. Of course, I think it has started before that. I think there were all other mechanisms and some also, to be honest, we have to tip our hats to some incredible founders too, like Xavier Niel, who was super supportive, and Kima, which invests in 100 companies, per year, 150,000. It's remarkable, and just somebody stepping up and doing something like that it can be an incredible boost to the ecosystem.
Mm-hmm. That, of course, is something that apparently the European startup scene is benefiting a lot from as well. Alumni like the two of you, in a way that are either serial entrepreneurs like David or seasoned investors, and that then kind of hand down their experience, and you have this growth. Back in the days, there used to be the term PayPal mafia. And here in Europe, I guess we have the Rocket Internet and Skype, not mafia, but definitely a group of people who then, turn their money as angel investors or their own ideas into new companies and just strengthen the ecosystem. So in a way, it just takes time, I guess, to grow a healthy startup ecosystem. You can't just invent it out of the blue.
But so yeah, I do think success breeds success. Out of unity, there's going to be a lot of great companies that are going to be created. I think it's an inspiration as well for a lot of people out of Denmark and Copenhagen, right? It's a big play, and to be honest, it's not just about that city. Unity also had a good team in Finland. I don't know all the details, but obviously
Vilnius.
Yeah,
Stockholm, Berlin, London,
exactly.
Brighton.
Yeah, and so that becomes the next level of inspiration, and again, the learnings that people had in a place like that, where you took it from nothing to 40-odd billion is extraordinary, right? And what we had previously was a problem in Europe where we didn't really have what I call 5-star generals who could manage really big teams and grow them to the next level, and that's where other parts of the world were better. But today, we can say that actually the difference, there isn't that big of a difference, and there is that expertise, and now it's more about the hunt for that talent. But talent is across Europe. You can find it, whether it's engineering, product, management, whatever else you're looking for.
There's often this, you can hear this a lot, that Europe simply doesn't have a Google, a Facebook, you name it. Then is this also mostly a matter of time? Will we see these global behemoths coming out of Europe in the future, do you think?
So
the answer has to be yes, but I guess we both hesitated.
No, I don't want to interrupt you. So
No, sorry.
I am. I'm a believer in that. Like Europe hasn't had the most sort of spectacular history in terms of what we've done since the Second World War when it comes to building our economy and building technology. I think there's something, we should reflect on what happened during the Second World War and what happened to our mindset. And I think there's a little bit of, it's harder for us to sort of in that mindset of think about global domination. Using that term is not something that Europeans feel very comfortable with. And I would say that, you take that term and you take it to the US and nobody has a problem with that. And you take it to China and nobody has a problem with that. So that affected our psyche, I believe. And I haven't done any study on it, but I can say that Europe were really the forefathers of modern science and innovation. Like if you look at some of the great achievements that have happened in the last 100, 150 years, much of that came out of Europe, and it came out of all parts of Europe, which is so exciting. And my belief is that, yes, we had a lull, but that doesn't stop us from having the possibility now, and I'm not saying it's going to happen, but we have the possibility now to take that back and actually be a player in the market. And for me personally, this is much more to do with, money and profits and big companies. I actually believe that our social structures and how we work with government and democracy and social structures is something that, will be reinforced through the successes that we have in our companies. So I always like to sort of comment, Daniel Ek changed the way people think about paternity leave, maternity leave in the US because of Spotify, and he had that ability. And I think there's many more things like that we can come with that sort of focus on the things that actually I believe are are good, sound principles that come out of Europe.
David, do you see Europe leading the way in certain areas as well?
Could. And as we're building this ecosystem and it's rapidly growing, we can generate our own gravity. There's a few things we need. We need like more capital, late stage capital, because that ends up being kind of a gravity well at maybe not at the end of a company's history, but sort of at the later stages of a company's history. But no, this is doable and necessary. At the end, as you basically say, Mattias, like to save social democracy and Europe.
Yeah.
What I was just wondering, Mattias, when you were speaking, is this diversity of Europe that Europe has, and that arguably also made Europe great during the Industrial Revolution because of the diversity of ideas and cultures. Is it still an advantage in the digital age where you can basically scale something globally coming out of nothing? Or is this fractured market with all the different cultures and the different languages, is it really more of a hindrance at times?
Yeah, so I think these are, again, it's just perspective that you take, and I always have to be careful that I'm not too optimistic about these things. But I look at it as a net positive. Of course, like this can push people in different directions where we don't get along and we don't understand each other. But it would probably be a scarier place if we all became uniform. And I think the one thing that is really helping Europe right now, because I believe that the hegemony of the US is going to change. Like there's going to be an East-West sort of power conflict that we know has already started, right? And to me, thinking about how you play in that, I think Europe has an important part to play, because we can probably understand and transcend some of these things because we deal with multiple languages across Europe, because we deal with multiple cultures on, not just on sort of country by country, but region by region. So I think that we are able probably to be that part of the world that's able to work in between maybe these two other forces. So I think that's going to become a competitive advantage for us. We understand.
I often think that a big home market is both a boon because it gets you started, and then at some point it becomes a hindrance or a trap. And the US is obviously the sort of has so far until recently been the ultimate big home market. But as for really global companies, it can definitely be a hindrance. And we from the small countries like Iceland and Denmark and Sweden to some level, we don't have a big home market. So we have to be thinking very internationally from early on, and that's definitely served the number of companies well.
On another point on this is what I find very interesting is that Europe has always been thought of as a place full of regulation and where we, where we're hindering, growth and complex and bureaucratic. But I actually think, many times if you look at like the US, I think there's many parts of it that actually are more regulated and also more bureaucratic. And so it's interesting that people have kind of have this view of Europe, but I actually don't know if it's really true. I think there are components of it that are true. Of course, there are some things that are not the way they should be, but it's fascinating to think that Europe is probably more open than many of other regions in the world. We let many internet companies build their businesses here, and the same is not really true to the same extent in other regions of the world.
Yeah,
very, very good. Thank you so much. We have an audience question that ties in nicely with sort of the topics we've been talking about. Let me read it to you. Quote, "My impression is that in Europe there are many people who are good at selling ideas, but not good at building something that actually works as a business. Do you agree?" David shaking his head. So you don't?
No. It doesn't seem to gel with what I find. I mean, there is definitely, especially historically, there's been some lack of ability to kind of sell. Actually, so almost the opposite of what the question proposes.
I agree.
So no, not really.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the problem that we have seen that Europeans are probably more humble, more careful, and therefore not been the fantastic salespeople that we probably should have been. And so we're probably good at building things that are really probably good, less at sort of convincing people to support them and help them build it. So I agree with David that I would have looked at it as it's a reverse problem.
Yeah.
So this takes us back in a way to something we touched upon before, which is lots of ideas are there, lots of eager founders. How do they get money from you? How do they get discovered? What do they need to do to convince investors like you that, yes, they are worth your money?
So Mattias is way more experienced in venture investing than I am. I'm a bit of a naivist and kind of new to this, but I think maybe the answer will still be the same, like build something great, you know, even if it's small and early, like, you know, make something awesome.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, it's about also people. So I think that's the other thing that probably David also looks closely at. It's about the experience, the talent, and their ability to attract more talent, their ability to hustle, and, you know, their experience and knowledge. You know, those become really important. And then, you know, like you say, something that's very compelling, proof that it, you know, always proof points that show that it's compelling. Not, you know, for us, we invest in businesses sometimes that, or fairly often, I should say, that haven't even launched a product yet. But, you know, they
made something.
They've done something, right? So, and if they haven't done anything, you know, sometimes they have created something before that looked very similar, or were working in a certain area. So yeah, and then I think it's about, you know, I think the harder thing is getting in touch with the right people at the right time and getting the right advice for those founders.
Sure. And then just being absolutely relentless and just keep going. And, you know, you'll have a touch point, you know, will hopefully not ignore you, but, you know, not really get what you're doing. And, you know, if you show up another couple of months later with something that's significantly improved or some new steps, that's when it's possible to get the notice, even as a first timer or whatever.
So I know this from Silicon Valley as basically the door towards at least the big names is, you know, somebody who knows them. It's basically a filtering system. And if David, if you say be relentless, if I send you 100 emails a day saying, please, 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 here's my great idea, that probably doesn't get me far, does it?
No, let's say maybe productively relentless, like be solving problems, like emailing one person more than a few times is like not solving problems. So yeah.
I think that might also change, by the way. I think going forward, if you're building something great, you'll end up becoming seen as well, rather than.
I mean, that's a nice. I mean, that's the mesh network of a good ecosystem, is able to kind of filter and catch stuff.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that, you know, particularly, so one of the things that we're doing at Moonfire is building a data-driven investment strategy, and there, you know, we are scanning and looking at what's happening with different people and where they're going next and what are they thinking, you know, what are they building. And so I think going forward, you're going to have a lot more firms. So we're not going to be the only one doing this, but the more and more they're going to be looking at that. And so rather than that sort of introduction, that warm introduction being so important, it's going to be more about, hey, what are you doing? What are you building? That's really interesting. And then you make direct contact with them. And as a firm, you know, you need to thinking about your ability then to, as a reputation and ability to help these companies take them to the next level.
I'm still trying to understand a little bit better what the basis is for your decisions. And indeed, we have an audience question that goes in the same direction, asking whether, for example, being a first-time founder or a serial entrepreneur, whether that makes a difference for you. So what are the different elements that you take into consideration? I assume it's not just gut feeling.
No, it's not. You know, gut feeling does count for a lot. But one of the things that I believe is that you can actually kind of institutionalize a lot of these thoughts and put it into, let's say, Moonfire itself. And I think that you can build systems that allow you also, to be honest, to maybe work on your own biases that can sometimes be quite strong, and sometimes you don't even see them, right? And so, there are a whole bunch of criteria. Of course, like if you've created something really innovative within a university that is remarkable, you're going to be seen and you're going to be heard. So yes, that's helpful. Yes, it is helpful if you started a company before, even if it failed. That is helpful because people know then this is not your first rodeo, or and you're able to take knowledge from what you did before. But I wouldn't say it's exclusive. I mean, we are investing in founders that haven't done anything before, and they're coming straight out of their own sort of bedrooms building their businesses, and we think that they're doing something unique in a certain area. I mean, one of the companies of that is Electric Noir. It's a business that in the gaming space, and where there was a meeting of minds is that both of us see the world where gaming is becoming a much bigger concept than just boys playing first-person shooter games in the basement. It's actually becoming a whole new transformation of content, and this is more about storytelling, murder mysteries, and so on. So that's where we connected, and we saw, okay, look, this is something that's really unique. But then we've invested in companies like Pento, which fabulous second-time founder coming out of Copenhagen, changing the way that payroll works. And their first business wasn't a huge success, but I believe, and I'm not alone in believing, that the next business looks like it's very promising.
David, you're both sort of with Nordic Makers. You're part of a VC group, but you're also an angel investor.
Yeah, so like Nordic Makers is also a group of angel investors. So we sort of pretend to be we pretend a little bit to be an early stage VC, but we're really not. And on my own, I do my own things. Maybe too much. We bought a domain .vc, but it's quite cheap. So no, I think it's not clear in my portfolio that I bias either way. I mean, it's easier to go to the second-time founders because they probably have a network. They probably are pulling together investors, etc. One of my favorite companies is first-time founders creating a nuclear tech company. Nothing obvious about that. Sort of coming out of various universities, including CERN, wanting to change the way we do nuclear. Obviously, incredibly smart guys and relentless, like nobody I've ever seen before. But no, I think we do both types.
Mm-hmm. And how do you find these ideas? Is it these new people? I assume some of it is people coming to you, but then you probably also stumble across people and ideas that from people who do not necessarily approach you. So what are your different ideas, strategies of discovering founders?
Just being open. There's so much stuff coming in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's it's
you're systematic, Mattias.
Yeah, our approach is we have at the moment we have an engine that helps us and identifies companies that says, okay, look, this is something you should look further at and spend some time with, and it's early days, but we'll continue to build that out and have that sort of data-driven investment strategy. But it's always augmented with human expertise and knowledge, because the hard thing with creating a programmatic system is that what we're really dealing with are sort of black swan events. That's what we're looking at. Things that cannot be defined by specific criteria necessarily, and that's why your question becomes very hard. Because we need to see the combination of things that gets us to believe that this is going to be something unique and remarkable. But by the way, though, I also don't think it is something that is that always that special, because I'm excited by 4 different trends. It's capital and finance. I think there's going to be a transformation of that sector, and it's all about access to capital and distributing it efficiently and cheaply to more people, and then actually building a better quality of product. And this, to be honest, this theme, that's a theme that when I looked at Klarna and made that investment, it's just as important as when I'm using that to make the decision to invest in Pento and let's say, will it pay? And there's like 10 years between it, right? And so And then, I look at it, like I said, within the gaming space, where I think it's transforming content, future of work, which suddenly has, obviously got a massive boost through this change of the pandemic, which has just reinforced some of these, clear trends that now have just jumped. We're now like 2 years ahead of what we expected to be. And then finally, also, the pandemic helped this area too, was looking at healthcare and the transformation there. Mostly, I still see this massive digitization that needs to happen. And, some interesting trends where healthcare used to be very centralized. You'd bring the sick into a sort of hospital, and I think that there's a stronger trend now in terms of decentralizing and helping care in homes, which really is going back to way doctors used to work, where you used to get home visits. And we can do that now with technology. It works, it's scalable, and so on.
David, where do you see the big trends, the big next thing coming out of?
So, I'm not so systematic, but there are a few obvious ones. Obviously, games is, going to be one of the biggest industries on the planet. I kind of love that industry. I love the people in it. I have mixed feelings about some of the products, but it's just, it's a trend that is just, will keep going and going, and it's fun to be part of. EdTech, I'm really passionate about. I have a few investments into EdTech companies that I love. And then kind of my big kind of, theme in my heart is, preparing for the time when my kids are going to ask me, where were you when, the climate crashed, and looking for companies that can have an impact on that, where Seaborg, the nuclear tech company I mentioned earlier, is my biggest play, and the one that can actually cut like several % of emissions from the planet. Ultimately, we won't be able to solve our problems with like 1 or 2 solutions. We'll need like 10 or 20,000 solutions, many of which will only cut like a 10th of a percent. But yeah.
So you just mentioned a company, Seaborg, I believe.
Yeah.
What is their approach? How do they want to?
Well, it's one of a handful of companies that is doing molten salt reactors, small reactors, so small and stable reactors. They all have different approaches. These guys have a very interesting and smart approach that isn't necessarily competing with the other ones. And yeah, they just raised money from Lucas Gadowski and a couple of other good people, on top of kind of me and a few of my friends earlier on. So they're off to races with kind of a significant sum of money to actually start building.
I met Troll.
Trolls.
You introduced me to Troll. Sorry, in the early days, and he's a remarkable man. He's got some.
He's incredible.
Incredible energy. So,
do you think that in innovators, small companies getting big, can really match the enormity of the problem that we have with the climate crisis? And there are, of course, many indications that we're getting much closer to tipping points than we were afraid of. Or do we need essentially also governments stepping in and trying to?
100%. Startups is not enough, but also government is not enough. We need a concerted effort across everything, right? The big industrials have to change. We have to change behavior. We have to do startups. We have to scale startups. We have to build infrastructure, like all of the above. Otherwise, we're going to fail, and we may fail. Yeah.
So can I ask a question there? I'm not supposed to be doing it, but then
no, please.
But we think about what Tesla and Elon Musk has done to the car industry. It was like a lightning rod, right? Where I think everybody believed a certain set of parameters. This is what they believed was fact, and it was not going to be able to change. And what we were doing, even thinking about electric cars was kind of almost a ridiculous idea. And then suddenly, he just put his power and effort into this, and then it's actually changed the whole mindset, both of society, but also of many people in the industry who basically, felt like they got caught with their pants down a little bit, and they needed to get in front of this and build their own solutions.
I always find it intriguing that General Motors had the EV1, but phased it out because it was only there to fulfill Californian regulations, and they didn't see the opportunity. And Tesla actually launched in the same year that GM made that decision. And it's telling a lot. Wonderful example of one company and one man's convictions really being able to move mountains and do a lot. Mattias, you mentioned how the pandemic has become an accelerator and changing things much more quickly. I wonder how that has affected your own work as well. You already touched upon it in the sense that you said, well, we can do things virtually now. Are you surprised that, how sitting in front of a screen has sort of replaced other things that you used to do before?
Yeah, so it was interesting, as I was thinking about my life in Moonfire, I started to think that I needed to spend more time, more efficiently. So efficiently at my desk, to be honest, instead of running around the world and flying around the world. And I was just like, am I a hamster in a hamster wheel? And am I making the right decisions? How am I thinking? So I kind of had it in my mind that I was going to be spending more time thinking about and having prepared for the different type of opportunities that are getting ahead in front of me and searching for them. So I already had that mindset, but I think the pandemic has just accentuated that even further, where now I'm here, and I roam the world from this room, starting off in Asia, sometimes speaking to people in South Africa and then, across Europe. And then, you end up going across the US. And it's remarkable and it's efficient. And so for me, this gives the opportunity to see more companies, spend more time thinking about what they're doing and how that fits into your way of looking at the world. And it allows us to work more efficiently and faster. So one of the things I'm thinking of is, of course, I love the interaction. So David and I, every once in a while, go for a beer and we have a chat. And it's a chat, it's emotional connection. I really enjoy it. I get a lot out of it. I get to hear what he's thinking and what he's doing. And we're not just talking about work, we're talking about life. And many times we're laughing and we're thinking about the wonder of it all, right? And that's beautiful. We don't necessarily get the same sensation, if we take a beer, here.
I miss that, man.
So, we need that interaction. It's core to us as human beings. So we're going to go back to that physical world, but I'm not sure I'm going to go 100% back. I'll probably go 50% back, and I will cherish those moments and make them maybe more part of my life where I'm having those wonderful, unique conversations with interesting founders and entrepreneurs.
What's the most valuable thing that gets lost when you just stare at the screen all day?
Well, to me, for one thing, I get really exhausted. I find that this year, strangely, physically has not been exhausting, but mentally, I feel a little bit more numb than I did at end of year last year. I think, these personal interactions are just so important. And strangely, I'm meeting a lot more people and I'm getting to know a lot more people, but there is something wonderful of that in-person relationship.
I really miss yes, the physical connection, just standing around, with a beer or something is really important, but actually we can get a lot of that done by phone in a way. I feel it's like going to a room where there's 10 people and I know half of them, and the other guys that I don't know, I also get to hang out with, and form a connection with. Now, they'll pitch to me virtually, and that's fine, but we won't be buddies also. And I think both I miss that, but also I really feel maybe bad for the people that don't have a network already. Because Mattias and I, we can chat, and we already had the beer in the past. There's a physical connection between us that doesn't get broken by Zoom. But I worry about some of the people sort of climbing out of their shells right now.
And then also, to me, it's demographics too, right? It's different for you and me. We have families, we have all kinds of things that sort of define our lives. When you're young and maybe alone and seeking your network and trying to build your network and maybe trying to break into, a difficult industry and wanting to have mentorship and so on, those human connections become so important. So So I feel that I'm the fortunate one in this scenario, where I now get to do my homework with my son every day. And that's a pleasure for me, seeing him get better every day. And that was something that I couldn't have before. But I think there's a lot of people too who are going home and probably not, or staying home and feeling a bit lonely.
What is it that you are looking forward to doing the moment that it's safe to roam the world again?
Me or
either one of you?
Just dinners with like groups of entrepreneurs. That's my favorite thing of all, outside of my kids. Just assembling like 8 to 10 people of who I know sort of half, and just having these kind of rambling conversations for a few hours. Oh, man, it's for me, that's the best.
Wow, I agree. And then you end up serendipitously meeting up with people that you didn't expect to meet up with. They're just sort of outside of the world that is sort of normal for you. And then, sometimes staying up later than you should be staying up late, just because you're having fun and the exciting conversations and you carry on. It's easy to sort of log out of here. It's harder to sort of extract yourself from a physical conversation and so on. I think also interestingly, I think the travel industry is going to be interesting next year, because I think, again, we're going to have a year of the haves and the have-nots. I think there's a lot of people who are going to suffer next year, just like there's been a lot that suffered. But there's a lot of people too who are still in a financially strong position, and they're going to do a lot of holidays. I think people are going to travel a lot, those groups of people, because they sort of feel like, I wasn't able to do that. I wanted to climb that mountain, or I wanted to cycle across whatever. Now I'm going to do it. And I spent a year sort of locked up in semi-prison, and I'm going to go out and I'm going to have fun.
Mm-hmm. There's one more audience question that I haven't mentioned yet, but I think it's a really interesting one, namely whether European founders often sell too early. So, they have some reasonable success, and then the big money comes from abroad, and they say, okay, sure, here's my company. What's your take on that?
David, you want me to start? David is a great example of not selling.
No, we didn't.
Right?
No, but we did move to the US and became a quite American company. We're sort of Delaware, San Francisco, and then global.
That's not selling out in my world. That's not a sellout.
No. But we did leave Europe to a larger degree than we sort of would have had to do later. But yeah. Okay.
But I would say too, it's I think, a founder has every right to sell whenever they think it's right to sell. And to me, particularly if the ecosystem or the system is not helping them financially, that's really hard to say to somebody, hey, you know what? You're sitting there, life-changing money on the table. Don't take it, keep going and risk it again. I know you have family and children and, dependents, but, don't worry about that. Double down. We can't expect that, which, by the way, that is changing because we're having secondaries. So founders are able to sort of have a lifestyle where they're able to support people and their own families and feel comfortable, and thereby be able to go the next sort of big, huge run, and again, double up is essentially what they're doing every time they're taking in more capital. Because if you don't double the value of the company in your next fundraising, you're probably not meeting or you're not meeting financiers' targets, right? Even at the lofty valuations that some of them are getting to already, they're expecting that. So I think it's harsh to sort of say, these people, why are they selling early? I think
don't focus on the people.
Sorry?
Don't focus on the people. Focus on the systems, and a strong ecosystem is the strongest antidote to selling early.
Yes.
You're surrounded by people that have gone longer. You have access to secondaries, and also just there's a competitive spirit in Silicon Valley that is awesome. Feeling sorry for the people that sold their company for $30 or $50 million. It's ridiculous, but it definitely gets people to go a bit further.
Is another person here would like to know whether Europeans are focused enough on sort of the long shots, the ambitious, really big ideas, and comparison here is to China, for example. But in general, are European founders trying to solve small problems too much, or do you see sort of the same ambitiousness that we see elsewhere?
So, I mean, David investment into nuclear power, and it to me is an ambitious project. You know, you have Don Yeliek, who has now said he's going to commit $1 billion to, you know, big ideas, and I think he's thinking exactly this segment. I think the problem has been capital. There hasn't been a lot of capital for that type of opportunity. And, if the capital's not there, it's probably not going to get very far. But I think increasingly the ambition levels have improved because the availability of that capital is becoming more prolific. So to me, it's a time thing. And in terms of our capabilities and ability to do that, I think we're absolutely there. Outside of tech and life sciences, we've seen in Europe, people doing actually quite extraordinary things. So I think it's more of where we are, where the ecosystem is, and time is going to solve that problem.
Mm-hmm. And we, of course, we have a wonderful example of a biotech company, BioNTech, from Germany, that showed, I think, 10 years of patience, and now really helped the world with its COVID-19 vaccine developed together with Pfizer. I see Steffi coming back. I have one more question, because we sort of neglected one aspect, which is that both of you, Mattias and David, you are focused on seed funding. Why is that so important in your opinion? Because there's a lot of money. Again, the Atomico report said 41 billion this year will probably be collected by European founders, which is more than ever before. So there is money, but why do you feel that seed investment is so important?
So my experience was that, especially in the past, European money was quite conservative, which also sort of refers to the last question. Whether you attack big problems or small problems, big and risky problems or small and safe problems. And I think, definitely Mattias and hopefully also me and some other founders that are coming out of the successful startups can bring some of this kind of, less conservative approach to early stage companies. It's also just fun. I love meeting the entrepreneurs.
I agree with that. It is really fun, and it is the foundation of any great company is really, it's at the beginning, it's the formative stage, and you can actually help create that trajectory. And a little bit, we talked about the reason for Moonfire. I mean, to me, if you're launching into space, you want to make sure that your angle is perfect as you can be, so you get the right way of traveling. I think that seed and pre-seed are overlooked in Europe. There's a lot more money going into the later stages. We have seen that, from the report that came out the other day from Atomico, that 40% last year of funds raised were funds that were over 500 million. And you compare that to 2016, it was something like 10%. So funds are getting bigger and bigger, having to deploy bigger and bigger checks. Actually, there's not as much going on the earlier stages. And if you compare it to the US, we probably have a few hundred companies you can name, maybe a focus on seed, whereas if you speak to LPs in the US, they believe there's over like 1,000 companies focused on seed in the US. So we're much smaller, and the number of like really strong seed firms the number is also significantly lower in Europe than there are in the US.
Very good. Steffi, you have a pressing question.
It's fascinating listening to you guys. It's really, it's not only fascinating, it's very inspiring and it's energizing. I think what you said, that Elon Musk changed our mindset concerning mobility. We should altogether change our mindset concerning Europe. Let's consider as a big ecosystems with fantastic entrepreneurs, with fantastic venture capitalists, and we have to do everything that the synchronicity between them is not only on a small scale. We have this, Europe is huge on one side and the other side it's small. Let's get it together. I think you're perfect role models for this get it together. And I wish I could hang out with you all the time and bring the best entrepreneurs together. So let's do it as soon as possible in a physical way and have fun together and have good companies, see good companies where we invest in. I like the idea of investing in nuclear things very much. I consider it as the very much needed frontier technologies we are facing now. Somehow, maybe you agree with me. I think we are in the moment in a phase like we've been in '95, where there was a technology called internet on the rise. Probably you've been in kindergarten then, but I remember it very well. I think this nuclear approach or the quantum approach or the biomorphing or whatever space is in the same area like the internet was in '95. And maybe we can all together find the treasure or get the treasure out. But before that, we have a beer and we talk to each other and we have fun. To make it a little bit more personal, I started to ask you, I start to ask you, and next things too, what is your favorite music, David? What music, what are you listening right now?
Oh my God.
Quick.
There's I cannot define any pattern, but oh my God.
One song. Mattias, what's your song?
Alien Etude. It's Alien Etude. It's there's a collection, it's an album that contains music that goes beyond 12 tones, and it's called Beyond 12. And it just it blows your mind. It's piano music. It's unbelievable. Piano's tuned in a new way.
We'll write it down and we publish it at the DLD music list. Mattias, yours?
Well, I like the classics, so I kind of like old rock and roll. So Soul Shine, which is I think is a great song. Let Your Soul Shine. I don't know if you know the song. It's by the Allman Brothers.
Oh, I love the Allman Brothers. It's wonderful. Yeah. Cool. I know it, but it's cool. It's very classic. It's my age, It's in the 70s or so. I was a hippie and I listened to it. So, and Carsten, your favorite music?
Well, it depends. It's actually funny because the wealth of content on Spotify makes me not even know anymore typically who I listen to. It's just this flow, and it depends on, do I need to be in the zone for writing, for concentrating? Then it tends to be more, some electronic flow music. If I had to name a name, I would say the Avener, who's a French electronic musician and has some catchy tunes. Dancing, for example, I don't understand why that hasn't become one of the tunes of 2020. But anything melodic and that sort of allows me to go happily through the day.
Thank you, Carsten. I'm asking you this because conversations with entrepreneurs is also on this. How do you start a conversation with someone you don't know? You have a conversation piece. Thank you for giving us this advice, and thank you for your approach towards Europe. I just think we definitely should continue. Please help me to connect the dots in Europe. In 10 years, Europe will be in another state as it is now. It's an European ecosystem, and you are the creators for it. Thank you so much for this great DLD Sync, and please stay in contact with us.
We will, for sure.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, guys.
Good.
I'll say mange tak and tack så mycket.
We traveled
the European aspect of this.
See you soon in person, hopefully. Have a good Christmas and come to Munich soon. Ciao.
Thank you, Steffi. Ciao, everybody.
Bye.